Good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for February the 2nd. Today we are reading together the 15th Psalm. Psalm number 15 is told to us as being a description of the godly. This is a Psalm of David. And the first thing I want us to note about Psalm 15 is that it serves as a very good counterpart to what is seen in Psalm 14. Psalm 14 talks about the fool. And we notice that the word fool there is from the Hebrew word Nabal or Naval. The B sounds like a V in a lot of Hebrew words. But that reminds us of the story of David from 1 Kings chapter 25, where he seeks out the help of a man named Nabal, and he refuses to help David. He is very disrespectful and lacks any semblance of grace or kindness toward David, and David's ready to take him out. Even after David has been so kind to him in helping his shepherds out in the field, but remember his wife, Nabal's wife Abigail, steps in and actually ends up saving his life for the time being. She actually ends up becoming David's wife. But what we have here in these two Psalms, Psalms 14 and 15, remember the Psalms themselves are works of David with the Spirit working with him, but the organization of the Psalter seems to have put these two Psalms together as a good counterpoint to one another. So Psalm 14, we have the fool and how the fool thinks and what the fool looks like. But now we have in Psalm 15 the opposite of that, what the wise person looks like, the person that is able to, as the question is presented, dwell in God's tent and live with him on his holy mountain. So we see the fool in Psalm 14, and again, the way he acts, what he does, who he is, and then we see the good, godly person, who he is, how he acts, and what he does in Psalm 15. So let's read that together here. Psalm 15, beginning in verse number 1. Here's the two questions that really set the foundation for what's going to be found in this text. Psalm 15, verse number 1, Yahweh, who can dwell in your tent? Who can live on your holy mountain? The one who lives blamelessly, practices righteousness, and acknowledges the truth in his heart, who does not slander with his tongue, who does not harm his friend or discredit his neighbor, who despises the one rejected by Yahweh, but honors those who fear Yahweh, who keeps his word whatever the cost, who does not lend his silver at interest or take a bribe against the innocent. The one who does these things will never be shaken. That is Psalm number 15. So thinking about this psalm, it breaks pretty easily into three parts. We have first part here, verse 1 is the question or questions that frame this psalm. And then verses 2 through verse 5, the first section of verse 5, this tells us the answer to the questions that are given in verse number 1. And then finally, there's a promise that is told at the end of verse number 5, pertaining the person who matches the description that is here within the text. So these questions there in verse number 1, Yahweh, who can dwell in your tent, who can live on your holy mountain. The idea here is who can have fellowship with you, who can be in a relationship with Yahweh, who is allowed to be in Yahweh's presence. Certainly, this would not apply to the fool, since the fool wants to deny Yahweh. Again, not in the theoretical atheistic perspective where the fool actually thinks that God does not exist. But remember, it's more of a practical atheism in that he behaves as if God does not exist. Well, certainly that person is not concerned with being in Yahweh's presence. But for those who have their head screwed on straight and who think the right way, they want to be in Yahweh's presence. They want to have fellowship with him, and they want to be in a relationship with Yahweh. So the question is, who can do that? Well, the answer is found again in verses 2 through 5a, the first half of the verse number 5. This is the person who can have fellowship with God. This is the person who shows by the type of person that he or she is that they are in Yahweh's presence. I guess I'll note this on the front end, is that these descriptions here are not the things that earn our way into Yahweh's presence. Being in Yahweh's presence is not something that we earn. It is something that he graces us with. But there's an expectation that when we humble ourselves before Yahweh, when we humble ourselves before his mighty throne and recognize that we are in need of a relationship with him, then that comes with certain expectations. And really, the reality is that when we are in the presence of God, that should change us and that should cause us to look a certain way. It looks like someone who lives blamelessly, practices righteousness, acknowledges the truth in his heart. This is somebody who we might rephrase that in shorter terms. This is someone who walks straight. This is someone who acts right. This is someone who tells the truth. Tells the truth. And certainly, again, these are the opposites of what we see from the fool. Look at if maybe the Psalm 14 is in the same opening in your Bible. Hopefully so. So you can just look over to it and you can read verse number 3 of Psalm 14. All have turned away, all alike have become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one. The counterpoint to that is a person who lives blamelessly, practices righteousness, acknowledges the truth. Acknowledges the truth. Again, unlike the fool from Psalm 14, who says in his heart, there is no God. This person, continuing on, does not slander with his tongue. He does not speak evil. This is a person who does not harm a friend or discredit a neighbor. Again, notice verse number 4 of Psalm 14, that the evildoers will evildoers never understand. They consume my people as they consume bread. Again, we talked about how there is an inherent mistreatment of those made in God's image when there's no acknowledgement of God himself. So whereas the fool harms others, the person who is able to be in Yahweh's presence does not harm his friend and does not discredit his neighbor. The person who is able to be in God's presence despises the one rejected by Yahweh, but honors those who fear Yahweh. This person chooses his friends very wisely. He chooses those who have influence on him very wisely. He's willing to keep his word, whatever the cost. He keeps a promise, even if it leads to his own harm. There is integrity that is found within the character of this particular type of person. Finally, in verse number 5, the person who can be in Yahweh's presence is the one who does not lend his silver at interest or take a bribe against the innocent. He's not greedy and he upholds justice. So think about all these characteristics: walking straight, acting right, telling the truth, not speaking evil, not harming those made in God's image, choosing friends wisely, keeping a promise, not being greedy, upholding justice. All of these, again, are characteristics that will be found within those who are able to dwell in God's presence. Again, this is not in any way, shape, or form a meritorious thing, but it is a response. This is what it looks like for someone to be able to be in God's presence. It's what's demanded of God. Again, you cannot dwell in his presence and think that you can behave contrary to his nature. No, those who are able to be in God's presence and who are able to remain there and enjoy the blessing of being in God's presence are those who very easily, or we might say very simply, behave like God himself. So who matches this description more than anyone? Who then is able to enjoy the promise of never being shaken, being able to live securely? Well, certainly the one who matches this description best is Jesus. Think about all the things that we described here within this text. Every single one of them, 10 or 11, they're descriptions that could be said as being true of Jesus. So is a wonder to us then whenever Jesus faced the trials that he faced, whether it be in the wilderness against the evil one, being tempted by him 40 days and 40 nights without food or drink, or whether it be the constant attacks that he faced by the Jewish leaders who hated him, or whether it be the persecution that came with the sham of a trial that took place and his eventual crucifixion. Why was Jesus able to face all of these things and have the victory in the end, in the resurrection? Well, he was able to have these things because this is the type of person that Jesus was. He was the perfect image bearer of God, which again, I joke around, is kind of cheating since he was the very essence of God himself. He was God himself in the flesh, but still he set the standard. He showed us that this If you want to know who can dwell in Yahweh's tent, who can live on Yahweh's holy mountain, who can be in fellowship with God, who can be in Yahweh's presence, who has the best relationship with God we can imagine, well, that would be Jesus, God in the flesh, who perfectly in every way exemplified the character of his Father in everything that he did on this earth. Therefore, he was able to live securely. He was able to not be shaken with the things that he faced. And here's the thing, friends, that promise remains for us too. If we strive and give great efforts out of our love and loyalty to God to display these type of characteristics as his people, those who have been graced to be in his presence and to be in fellowship with him and to have a relationship with him, if we can do these things, if we give great effort again out of love and loyalty, then we too can live securely and never be shaken in whatever we face in this life. And that certainly beats uh, the reality of the outcome for those who are fools and who say there is no God and live like that. Remember, we think about them, their end is dread. They'll be filled with dread. Reading from other psalms as well, we know that their end is destruction. But not for those who can be who dwell in God's presence. We will never be shaken. And what a wonderful thought that is for this Friday. If you have any questions or comments about Psalm 15 or its association with Psalm 14, please feel free to leave that in the comment section below. And I appreciate you taking some time to read along with me on this Friday. Hope you have a great rest of your Friday, and may God bless you in all that you do, and look forward to being with everybody on Sunday and continuing our read into Psalm 16 on Monday. Hope to see you then. Take care, and God bless.